Welcome, everybody, to Wrestling Memories, episode 41. Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon, take 2. Because we fucked up the first time. As always, I am your host for Wrestling Memories, Johnny Sinister, the Sinister One, the king of timeout. Oh, happy to have everybody with us this evening. As always, we have with us tonight on the panel, we have JP Baker and Tattooed Mistress of the Cold Bone Show. What's going on, everybody?
I am doing good. I am doing good. How is everybody else doing?
Doing fantastic. And to my left, I hope, is the legendary
DJ
Mouth Mike Bobbitt,
aka DJ Skinny Penis,
aka DJ Skinny Penis. What's up, Bobbitt?
You're frozen.
Got cracking, homies.
What you got cracking? That's DJ Skinny Penis. That's DJ Skinny. Penis.
I don't know if it's just me, but I always got to introduce Bobbitt as like fucking like Bobby the Brain Heenan, where he would kind of have that almost like Dusty Rhodes would do, the legendary,
right? The legendary, the second most recognizable person on the YouTube.
Of course, like I said, we're redoing the Austin versus McMahon rivalry show because the last time we tried to do this,
we talked about it and then we went off on a tangent.
We went off on a major tangent. I think it was a very heavy news week.
It was a needed tangent, and I think that was the week that Becky Lynch got punched in the face.
Oh, yeah. It was a much need. We had to go on a tangent, so we're coming back. We're redoing it. We're rehashing some stuff. Going through that. Oh, good. So, that being said, Austin versus McMahon is arguably the greatest rivalry ever at least in WWE. I think we could all agree on that?
It does, and the only one that I think could actually rival that is really, I don't think any one of them can rivalry it would be The Rock and Stone Cold, or The Rock and Triple H. Orton, Cena.
Or if you want to go outside of the company, Bischoff and Ric Flair.
Bischoff, Ric Flair, Sting those are probably the only ones that could rival. But yes, I agree.
What about Flair versus Rhodes?
Yes, there's another one. We will do that rivalry because they did, was it 3?
Yep.
They main evented 3 Starcades, 2 or 3 of them.
Well, we can at least say this. When it comes to rivalries, Stone Cold Vince McMahon is the best rivalry in WWE's history. Flair and Rhodes, I would argue, is probably the best in WCW and NWA history.
Yes.
I could rival that with Sting.
You think Sting would be another one?
I think Sting could rival Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, to be honest with you. Just with as many matches and how many great matches that they had, they worked so well together. Just like Vince and Stone Cold, they meshed. Yes, we know Wendy. Her diaper and me are having a rivalry right now.
Get on topic, you guys. So how it kind of came about was really Stone Cold actually being upset
because he got hurt. Owen Hart did the pile driver on him, and he had to step away, and they would not let him compete.
Well, I'm actually talking about a little bit before that.
Okay.
What I'm referring to was sort of really started, or what was probably the catalyst, is Stone Cold had just kind of took on, because he was the ringmaster beforehand.
Okay.
And then he adopted the new brash persona that we all know and love today.
Yes.
And what was happening is they were cutting some of his lines that they were saying.
Yes.
And he went to Vince, and at this time, he didn't know Vince very well.
Yes.
And he went to Vince and specifically said, look, I could go up against anybody you put in front of me, but if you take away my character, I ain't got nothing.
Yep. That's true.
So I look at that moment as really the catalyst for this feud. Because had Vince McMahon not let Austin go, I don't think we would have gotten this feud.
No, I mean, you're right, but I guess I'm looking at it from a kayfabe standpoint. That's the shoot version of how the catalyst. Vince McMahon, by Stone Cold coming to him saying, I think we have something here. The real catalyst was when Bret Hart got screwed over. That's what really started everything with the feud between him and Stone Cold.
What we're talking about, of course, everybody, it's one of the most talked about topics in wrestling, the Montreal Screwjob.
Yep.
And the significance of that event really, the one thing I don't think that people talk about enough is just how much that moment changed wrestling.
True.
I don't think people give it as much credit as where they talk about how it was such a controversial topic and yada, yada, yada. But I don't think people really ever understand how significant that moment was because it presented itself realistically the birth of arguably one of the greatest heels in wrestling history.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I agree.
By a non-wrestler of all things.
Yeah, exactly. The feud, the Montreal Screwjob, and we're not gonna talk about what's going on today. We're gonna talk about this, but this is what frustrates me sometimes with people in the WWE today, and I'm just gonna make this point, is that back then, they threw realism into feuds. They don't do that today. Now they're kind of doing it a little bit with the Dean Ambrose-Seth Rollins feud, which nobody cares about. I don't. But, I mean, they're throwing realism in. They're starting to throw realism back into it, but realistic feuds, actually what really kind of gave us that new fresh look that we were looking for instead of the pushing the fucking same heel or same Hulk Hogan like type character all the fucking time. Now we're getting this is how we build new stories, how WWE built new stories, and it built new feuds, so to speak, is with realism. So
we're getting to the point of what JP was talking initially was talking about. Austin got hurt. Owen Hart had hurt Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Broke his neck. And at this time, the Vince McMahon character, they've already kind of had a couple times beforehand, had a couple of run-ins. Not to the level that it got, but it was more of a back and forth between him and Vince McMahon. Nothing really major. Vince McMahon was still kind of coming into his character.
Yes.
And then it was when they wouldn't let Austin wrestle, and he became frustrated, got in the ring, and it was at this moment that realistically I think is when Vince McMahon really came into his character because he really stepped out at this point and got in the ring. And he had been in the ring before, but this was the first time I think we ever really saw Vince take a bump.
Yes, and the whole thing is, in Michael Hayes, Doc Hendricks, whatever they fucking called him
At that time, yeah.
at that time. But it's Michael Hayes, and everybody said that nobody knew, even I didn't know, that Vince McMahon was really the owner of the company. And this is where his character took off. When he got into that ring and said, "Stop doing what you're doing. We are concerned about you." And I don't remember in the feud if he said anything that he owned the company or whatever, but oh my God. But he ended up saying that, that's when I appreciate that you and WWE care about my well-being, but I appreciate the fact that you can kiss my ass, and then he stuns him. That's what started the feud.
And arguably one of the worst stunners ever given. Vince there's one thing about Vince that he's never quite learned in all the years he's been in the company, is he never quite learned how to take that bump.
Right. To be honest with you, to me, it's more, and I get what you're saying, but it's more of a realistic bump.
Right.
To me.
Right.
And that's what made it look so good to me. I mean, you look at JR, he did the same thing too. Yeah, Sergeant Slaughter did the same thing. They all took the bump like it was really happening. Look at The Rock. Look at fucking Scott Hall when he took the stunner. He took 2 stunners right in a row at WrestleMania 19, I think it was. He did the one where he did the whole, and he just stood up like this, and then fucking Stone Cold stuns him again, and he stuns him, and then he jumps 15 feet in the air and lands on his back. The Rock does backflips off of a fucking stunner. I like the way fucking Vince and them guys did the stunner. They took it. They took it.
Another person that didn't take the stunner well was Triple H.
That is true. Triple H did take the stunner pretty well.
He took it like Vince, like straight up like Vince. Like, that's why I'm asking. I don't ever remember Triple H ever taking it. I'm sure he has, but
I think
I'd have to go back and look.
I think he did a little bit of a jump, but it was more
that he took it and then went limp.
Yeah, it's kind of. I think Triple H is probably taking it the best out of all of them, because it was kind of a mix between how Vince took it and how everybody else took it.
Right. You're supposed to go to your knees when he goes to his butt, and then you just go limp to the ground. That's how it's supposed to go.
Right. So what happens after this is that basically Stone Cold gets his chance at a match, but he has to sign a waiver.
Yes.
And this really progresses, and this is where we start seeing the power play of Vince McMahon. This is when all the what we know about Vince, when he always played the evil corporate boss of having that little shady kind of slip-in stipulation, or he makes something, he put the odds against. This was really kind of the first time we saw that happen. And
this is what happens when you have a newborn in the house.
Hi, Miss Wendy.
She wants to know. She wants everybody to know that she is here.
Are you there?
She is. You can hear her. You know she's there. Now she's sleeping. Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, she is. She's out. She's out. Go ahead, Johnny. I'm sorry.
No. It's okay. So my question for you guys is, do you think it's more of a if or, do you think that maybe sometimes people hype up this rivalry too much, or do you think it deserved every bit of the hype that it got?
Bobby, go ahead. You go first. I always go first. Go ahead, man. Steal my thunder.
I think the rivalry was that good to where people does talk about it for years and years and years. Like, there was some feuds that was overhyped, I will admit that, but this one in particular wasn't like that. It was It was the working class against the boss. That's how this feud was basically. Middle America saw this as, everybody wants to stun their boss. I want to. I know Johnny, you want to on some days. I know JP does on some days. We can't do that. Well, Stone Cold doing that to Vince was our, we ate that shit up.
Right.
JP.
I mean, it is overhyped, but I will say this, justifiably so.
Okay.
Justifiably so. Just because look at the feud itself. Look at what it did. It transcended the business.
Yes, it did.
Of course it needs to be overhyped. I mean, look at the Authority. They're still trying to recreate that. But today,
this has been one of the most tried to duplicate. This is one of the most duplicated scenarios that WWE has done.
Yep. And people could say that Vince McMahon stole the idea from WCW. I tend to disagree with that because they may have taken the concept, but who did it better, WCW or WWE? Who did it better, Eric Bischoff or Vince McMahon? Eric Bischoff will tell you Vince McMahon did because he's a fucking genius.
Right.
People shit on Vince. He is a fucking genius. However, he is
certifiable at times?
No, I wouldn't say certifiable. I would say so much that he is trying. I think he's really trying to find what works, and he just hasn't found it. He hasn't caught lightning in a bottle again. Is the problem? If that makes sense.
Well, and I think too, when you look at the Austin and McMahon feud, I definitely agree with Bobbitt that it was about the working man going up against the corporate.
Oh, boss. Of course it was, and that's why I love the feud.
And it was very realistic. I think the difference, the reason why, I don't think the concept, I think maybe he took that.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
But they didn't steal it because the difference between in their feud and what Bischoff was doing, NWO was often seen as almost another promotion.
Right. Well, I guess the kind of what I was trying to say was not so much that he took that he stole the concept. And Eric Bischoff will tell you that he may have taken that concept from me, but he ran with it better than I did or ever would have thought of doing.
Right. He improved on the formula.
Yes.
And that's one thing that we can take from this is that, a good deal, what we were talking about last Saturday, is that when we were talking about, indies taking ideas from WWE and Vince has taken a lot of ideas. But the thing is Vince is the only one that's ever made it work.
Yes. And I think that's where that's where I think people misunderstood what I was trying to actually say. Vince is a fucking certifiable genius when it comes to wrestling. And everybody can sit there and say, no, he's not. Then you need to go back and watch the Attitude Era because 95% of what happened during that time was Vince's fucking idea. He just hasn't caught lightning in a bottle again. Right. That's why he keeps calling back The Undertaker and The Rock and all these fucking people because he's trying to catch lightning in a bottle and it's not working.
No. And so when you look at this, the feud has started building, and at this point, I think what really kind of set Vince apart, he really played that corporate boss in the sense that the build to their match, Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon, was a good year in the making.
It's true.
And up until that point, what made this feud so great is that even though it was between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon, other people were involved. The surrogates for Vince McMahon.
Yes.
The Rock. Mankind. He would have these wrestlers act on Vince McMahon's behalf. And it elevated other. That's what this feud. That's why this feud was so in this rivalry between them.
I was just gonna say that
was so good. It elevated other superstars.
I was just gonna say that. This is, and Bobbin, I'm gonna ask you this question. I know Johnny asked a question, but I'm gonna ask you this question because we know that you never get to fucking get a word in edgewise. But I'm gonna ask you this question. Would you say that this would be that feud? The reason that this feud is arguably one of the greatest feuds of all time is because it created other feuds within the company.
Yeah.
And that's all you're going to say is
yeah. Because, no, I got more.
Okay.
This feud, look what got spawned. The Cena-Orton feud.
Well, no. Stone Cold had nothing to do with Cena-Orton. I'm talking like The Rock and Stone Cold. The Rock and fucking Triple H. The Rock and Mankind. The Rock and Dude Love. That's what I'm talking about. It spawned them feuds.
And those are all great feuds. Amazing feuds.
And it's going a little further back, but on the back burner of this, like the times when Austin wasn't around, it also created really great baby faces because, like The Rock, Mankind, when they turned on Vince, it was literally thunderous when they did it, and it all stems from that one feud.
Yep.
It all stems. You can thank almost the entire Attitude Era just off of that one feud alone. Set off a rapid chain of events.
Exactly.
That carried us, realistically, the result of the Austin and McMahon feud was so significant. I'm going to go out and boldly claim that feud, what spawned from that feud, really carried it all the way through till the end of the Ruthless Aggression Era. Because of how many stories it just kept branching off.
Yes, and that's the thing, and essentially, it was the boss being an oppressor, and the employees fighting back against the oppressor or the owner, saying you are screwing us over. Stop doing this, or we're going to beat the fuck out of you. Which is essentially what happens. And if you think about it, Stone Cold, you had Mondays was perfect because Monday was the blah day. You're sitting there. You couldn't wait to get home and watch Raw because Stone Cold Steve Austin was going to fucking beat the shit out of the fucking owner, which made you feel better because he did exactly what you felt like doing on fucking Monday.
And here's and this is the only thing that I'll compare to more present day. The reason why Daniel Bryan versus The Authority did not do as well. I know a lot of people compare that to the Vince McMahon rivalry. There's a key difference. The Authority did not make that feud. It was the fans being so behind Daniel Bryan that they want him to go over. And the reason why it's never been able to be duplicated is because it's not Vince McMahon.
Yep.
Vince McMahon, as great and as over as Stone Cold was, what really made this rivalry and this feud work was Vince McMahon himself. And the reason why they have not been able to duplicate this is because it hasn't been Vince McMahon. And if you look at it, the feuds that spawned past as the Austin versus Vince McMahon rivalry is every time, and why I say it went on into the Ruthless Aggression era, because you had feuds like Triple H versus Vince McMahon.
Yep.
And this only worked when it was Vince McMahon.
That is true.
That's how significant Vince McMahon was to the Austin rivalry. I don't think Austin would have been over, but he would not be immortalized as a legend as much if it had not been for this rivalry.
That's true. I could agree. I will agree with that. I don't think it would have had the luster. I don't think The Rock and Stone Cold would have had the feud without the fucking Vince McMahon fucking feud with Stone Cold, to be honest with you.
I don't think Mankind would have been as significant.
I don't think Mankind would have been a fucking thought, to be honest with you. The Undertaker would have, but The Undertaker was always Vince McMahon's go-to.
Right. And so we keep going through this. I know we kind of deviate a little bit, but
not really. Yeah.
but the slight deviations always go back to the timeline of this feud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Almost anything you can think of, you can trace it back to this feud.
Yep. Anything you trace back, today's Authority with Baron Corbin, to Stephanie and Triple H, they all tried duplicating what Vince McMahon did. Vince McMahon is, and you've heard this, I'm sure everybody's heard this. If you haven't, then I don't know what rock you've been living under. People have said that one of the greatest, probably the greatest heel to ever step foot into the wrestling world is Vince McMahon. Why?
Right.
Because he played the part of a fucking prick boss. Because he was the prick boss. He was the literal boss, and that's why it worked. Because he was the owner, and he played his character perfectly.
Well, and I think because some people compare Stephanie to her dad. The difference there is
she tries too hard.
Stephanie tries too hard, and she has go-away heat.
Yes.
There was a charm to Vince McMahon.
He got booed, but he got cheers as well.
Right. There was something you loved to hate him.
I think the reason why people hate Stephanie is because she tries to sound like her dad.
Yeah.
With the way she talks, she'll actually throw that "your bullshit." That's why everybody fucking hates Stephanie. It's the way she talks. If she comes out and just talks like a normal human being, coming out and being a bitch instead of trying to sound like a man, people probably like her a little better.
Yeah. And so it's just really, I mean, there's so many moments I get kind of lost. I get lost in track on when things happen.
Well, I'll do this. Stone Cold, the real kickoff of the feud is when Stone Cold won the title at WrestleMania 14.
Yes.
And that's when the feud really went to the next level, because now Stone Cold is saying in the press conference, "You ain't molding me, motherfucker. I'm going to be who I am, who I've always been. And if you don't like it, you've got one hell of a hellraiser on your hand." And that's where it went from there. Well, they took the title off of him with Kane. He ended up winning it back the next fucking night. If I'm correct, yeah. He won it back the next Raw the next night. And I think that was the first blood match.
Well, did Mike Tyson happen before that or after?
Mike Tyson happened at WrestleMania 14 when Stone Cold won the title the first time.
So that's also a really key moment, because you think about it, that's what took this feud into the mainstream.
Yes. And that's honestly where Vince said, and he actually went on national TV the news interviewed him and said that son of a bitch screwed me, and that really is that. I guess that is really when. I'm sorry, I keep backtracking, but I forgot about that moment when he said that, because I watched it again today and I always forget shit. But yes, Mike Tyson is where it fucking really started. And then it took another level when he won the title. And then it took another level when he lost the title. And that's when you got all the fucking driving the Zamboni into the fucking ring and fucking...
Right. Well, and again, it goes back to why this feud worked. There was an element of realism in that Mike Tyson, in the Mike Tyson thing.
Yep.
Because they were trying to pull in a legit badass.
Right.
And that's what made it really take off, is that famous moment, Stone Cold getting in the ring and flipping Mike Tyson off. Everybody knows, you don't do that to Mike Tyson. He might butt rape you.
He might, because he did go to prison. But, so he ends up winning the title at WrestleMania 14. Now, really where it really starts going is right after WrestleMania. That's for me when the feud really took the fuck off. He loses the title, and they had Vince McMahon's whole fucking agenda was getting a fucking title off of him and ruining Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah. So
he ends up losing the title. That's when Mankind and The Rock had their match. Mankind, they kind of, because Stone Cold was going through some stuff. He was fighting injuries. So they this is when Mankind stepped in and kind of fucking took the helm of kind of like Stone Cold, but not really. Then Stone Cold came back and they did the whole storyline, and then Royal Rumble happened. And everybody points to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre to them being their first match. That was the first time they met one-on-one. The very first match that they had was at Royal Rumble. Stone Cold, and if you remember the bingo thing, and I was talking to Heather about this today, the rolling drum, he pulled out the number and he said it's number 1. And if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Stone Cold come out and then he's like pulling fucking the balls out, pulling them out, looking at the number, it's 1. Every single one of the numbers was 1. And then that's when Shawn Michaels came on and said, and they did the whole, if he's number 1, you're number 2. Because he is the commission. He was the commissioner at the time.
Yeah, he was the commissioner at the time.
Yep. So they had the Royal Rumble match. Go ahead, John.
And they did that beautifully.
Yes.
They did that beautifully.
Now, I will say this, though. With that, if you go back and look at that, they had, 90 seconds in between competitors?
Yes.
Right? There was more than 90 seconds between competitors during that, just so that them two could fucking do their thing.
Right.
That was one of the inconsistencies about the Royal Rumble match. However,
and then this was also one of the very few times in the Royal Rumble where we actually got backstage segments where they're beating up Austin in the back and they think Austin's gone, and then he comes back, and you want to talk about getting some real heat on you. That moment when you thought for damn sure that Austin was going to win the Royal Rumble, and Vince McMahon comes up behind and throws him over the top rope.
Well, it's because of The Rock Stone Cold came back and eliminated everybody. Vince McMahon gets in the ring. The Rock comes out and gets in Stone Cold's face, and he's sitting there pointing at the title, and The Rock distracts him enough to where Vince knocks Stone Cold Steve Austin, or throws Stone Cold Steve Austin over the top rope. Vince McMahon wins the match, and he becomes the #1 contender. Now, if I wasn't was it the very next night that
comes
Vince
out
McMahon
and
came out and said, I'm going to relinquish my number one contender's position to not face you at WrestleMania. That's when Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold were sitting there drinking beer. I'm assuming it was at a bar or it was at one of their houses. I don't know the story behind that, but and this is Shawn Michaels said, if Vince McMahon checks out, old Stone Cold snakes his way right in. And then this is where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where Vince McMahon says, or Stone Cold says, I'd much rather beat the hell out of you than have a shot at the title. I will put my number one contendership up if you have a match with me. And then that's when St. Valentine's Day Massacre came in.
And this is what we always talk about, even on other shows. This match took a year to build.
Mm-hmm.
This one-on-one match. That's why people tend to remember that one over the Royal Rumble.
Right. Think about this for a second, people. And I hate to interrupt you, Johnny. Again, look at the way the story was told. Was it that fucking hard to tell a good story? And to tell me that they can't book long-term anymore is foolish. They can. They just don't. They're lazy. Their writers are lazy.
Yep.
Why are they writing for you if they're lazy? That's lazy booking.
Well, I mean, look at all the moments. I mean, and you had, after he lost the title, we got the Zamboni and the beer bath.
The beer bath. Yep.
Dude. I don't know if that was before their match at Valentine's Day Massacre, but
I think it was after. It was after. It was probably... No, it was before. I think it was before. Because it was... I think. Because it was in between the Royal Rumble and the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
You get the Zamboni, and the Zamboni alone was huh?
The monster truck.
Can't forget the monster truck, too.
Don't forget the concrete into the Corvette.
I know, and and you think what was so great is that every time they did something, you're sitting there thinking, how can they fucking top this?
Yep.
And every time they freaking did it. And a lot of the stuff you see today, Stone Cold did it.
Yep.
Well, except for maybe like Braun Strowman picking up a freaking ambulance, but that's besides.
Yeah, that was helped by Crane, but whatever. That's neither here nor there.
But to me, I thought the Zamboni moment was crazy enough, but to me, that beer bath.
The beer bath was fucking great. And then they duplicated it, and I'll say this. On top of that, they duplicated it. Even though it was copied, it was still original. It was when Kurt Angle did the milk bath.
The milk truck, yeah.
It was a comedy segment. You look at, and we'll get into that later. We're probably going to do two parts to this because this is only like the first 2 years of the feud. The feud lasted for 6 years.
Oh yeah.
So the feud, if you wanted, the kayfabe feud goes on today. Stone Cold. In fact, he stunned both Shane and Vince in the middle of the ring last year at the fucking 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
So the kayfabe feud is still there, but we know that they are really good friends in the long run.
Right,
but we'll also get into their real feud that they had.
So I mean. And even then, even after you and that's why I said that even after, this is why it was so good. It elevated new superstars. It made superstars out of a lot of people. They kept topping what they were doing and made it even more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what really kills me about this is how simple it was.
Mm-hmm.
How simple of the idea of this rivalry was.
Mm-hmm.
A working man versus his boss. How much simpler can you get?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It could have been a one and done thing, but they ran with it for 6 fucking years.
And it was gold.
Yep.
And when you come to Stone Cold and Vince McMahon, it ran for 6 years, but that Vince McMahon thing ran on all the way up until he stopped coming into the ring.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Totally agree.
Even when Shane McMahon came back, and that segment with him and Vince McMahon, I'm talking the first time Shane came back when they were giving that award to Stephanie.
Yes.
I mean, it was granted, the Undertaker match versus Shane was not that interesting, but what made it interesting, Vince McMahon.
Yep, man. People shit on the guy, but the guy's a certifiable genius. He gets that heel heat. And when I say heel heat, I don't mean Stephanie McMahon go away heat. I'm talking about real heel heat. Yeah, I mean, do you want to get into the St. Valentine's Day Massacre match? And then get into the WrestleMania match, which kicked off probably one of the top 5 feuds in the WWE between Rock and Stone Cold. The first time that them two ever met at WrestleMania.
Why don't we go through the St. Valentine's match?
Okay.
And we'll pick up next week at WrestleMania.
Okay, we can do that. All right, let's do that. All right, so go ahead.
So we talk about, the Zamboni, the beer bath, all that. All this is leading up to one moment. A one-on-one match with Vince McMahon. And it's not just any match, it's a cage match.
Right.
And I gotta tell you, Stone Cold, this match was so fucking good for just one reason and one reason only. Stone Cold beat the ever-living shit out of Vince McMahon.
Yes, he did. And again, I go back to this. It integrated new stars.
And also was the debut
of the Giant or the Big Show or his real name, Paul White.
And you know what was also great is we got to see Vince McMahon kind of out of his suit.
Yes, and they said this, and this is one thing that I'll give Vince McMahon credit for. He will not ask any one of his superstars to do something that he will not do himself. Now, everybody knows that I'm not one for high spots. Everybody knows that. Depending on what the high spot is. Now, the high spot that I don't like are the ones like the one with The Undertaker throwing Mankind off the fucking top of the cage. Don't care for it, because you can fucking kill somebody. The ones that I do like are the ones like a 450 splash onto a competitor, on a table, inside the ring. As long as there's something there to break their fall. Now, they could get hurt still, but they're safer. They don't have to fall as far.
Well, what was so cool about, Vince, and what made the wrestlers gain a lot of respect for Vince, is he took a fall off of the fucking cage.
Yeah, he took the fall. I didn't like the spot because Stone Cold did say, I thought he was dead.
Well, and what was funny about that is he literally sat there and asked on live, is he dead?
Yeah.
He literally asked the ref, is he dead?
Go ahead,
the part
of the match I liked the most was Stone Cold was about to leave the cage. Vince, bloody and all, kept doing this to Stone Cold.
Kept flipping Stone Cold off to keep him. That was at the end of the match. Towards the end of the match, Stone Cold kept flipping him, or Vince kept flipping him off, calling him a son of a bitch, this, that, or the other thing. Stone Cold kept on coming back, beating the fuck out of him. He'd stun him. And I think it was like the third or fourth stunner that Paul White came out from underneath the ring, up through the ring. The first time we'd ever seen that.
Yeah.
And Stone Cold, although it still made Vince McMahon look strong, even though he took one hell of a fucking beating. It made Stone Cold look strong, even though he beat the hell out of fucking Vince McMahon. It made Paul White look fucking like invincible because he threw him through that fucking cage.
Fun little fact about that is Paul White really did. That wasn't supposed to happen.
No, but it worked. It worked. Now, that being said, with today, this is why I don't like WWE and their choreography. Because that's what it is. It's choreographed garbage. That's not what I wanted to see. And Vince McMahon, if you listen to him, if you go back and watch their rivalries, if you listen to him, it wasn't about ballet. But yet today it is. So what has he changed? Who is he listening to? That now we're getting this choreographed ballet Swan Lake bullshit.
Well, I'm fixing to piss a lot of people off here. You can thank the indie fans.
See? And I'm not shitting on the indies. I'm not going to shit on them. Because I'm not shitting on the fans. You can be a fan of whatever you want. But, yeah. But that match, I don't even know how long it was. Wasn't it like 20 minutes?
It was a long match.
And it was 20 minutes.
Yeah, it was like 30 or 40 minutes.
Was it really? 30 or 40 minutes? You think Vince McMahon could take a beating for 30 to 40 minutes? I mean, Vince McMahon is like 52, 53 years old.
Hang on, let me look it up here right fast.
But I just know that either way, Stone Cold beat the ever-loving hell out of Vince McMahon. That being said, the blood spot where Vince McMahon got busted open was not supposed to happen either.
No, there was a lot of stuff that was not supposed to happen.
Because if you listen to Vince McMahon, he says I went a little bit too hard and I ran right into the connection of the cage.
Well, one of the funniest things he said during that is he goes, "I knew it would hurt, but I didn't know it would hurt that much."
Right. So that's when. And if you look at these chair shots, everybody likes the chair shots to the head. If you look at the chair shots that they did, very seldom did they use chair shots to the head.
No,
it was in certain situations that they did. You look at, and we'll get into it, you look at The Rock and Stone Cold at WrestleMania 19. It was WrestleMania 18 where Scott Hall and Stone Cold wrestled.
Yes.
WrestleMania 19 when Austin turned heel. And we'll get into that this next week, I promise. But, yeah.
Okay, Trackopedia is saying the match lasted 7 minutes and 56 seconds.
Well, it seemed like longer than that.
I just now look.
Well, that's the match itself. The match didn't start right away, if I remember correctly.
I don't think it did either.
I don't know, because if that's the case, that match should have ended when Vince McMahon landed on the table. Mm-hmm. Right? Because their feet touched.
Do the match, do that St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Stone Cold and Vince McMahon segment. See how long that was.
Yeah, I mean, because if that's the case, then that match should have ended with Vince McMahon winning because Vince McMahon's feet or body touched the ground.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, And this is why I said, this is why that argument that I had with the person touching the feet first, this is that argument that I'm fucking talking about. And I think I might have made mention of it. But I don't think the match ever started. So the segment probably lasted about 20 minutes because it was just Vince getting the shit beat out of him. Then the match started, and then that's when Paul White came in and took care of it. I can honestly, I can go back and go to the network and find out. It's really simple to do. Just go to the network and it'll show you how long the segment is.
Yeah.
From bell to bell.
I'll do that right now.
Because from bell to bell, it was 7 minutes and 56 seconds. But the segment, like Johnny said it himself, was probably 20, 30 minutes long. But I don't know. I'm not saying I know. It's been a while since I've seen that pay-per-view, but I'm pretty sure that segment was a lot longer than 7 minutes and 56 seconds.
Yeah, because Jack said in the chat that McMahon wouldn't let Austin in the cage either.
See, there you go. So that Stone Cold got outside of the cage. Or no. How did Vince McMahon get out of the cage then?
Austin climbed into the cage. If I remember right.
But the bell didn't ring.
We'd have to go back and watch it.
I'm just... Okay, well, it's fine. But I'm just saying. So there was a reason why Stone Cold ended up winning at the end. Because if that was the case and the match itself... See, everybody's like, well, this match lasted 30 minutes. Really? If to be honest with you, it probably didn't. Bell to bell. Okay, so there you go. Before they could even... Because both competitors' feet have to be touching the mat in order for the match to start.
Right.
And at that point, one was climbing in, and at that point, the other one was climbing out. So neither one's feet touched the mat. So the segment lasted a while. But then they got outside of the cage, and then Vince McMahon and Stone Cold all over the fucking ring, beating the fuck out of him. Because that match should have ended right there, and it didn't. So that being said...
At that point, the match wasn't started.
Yes.
And here's I think the one thing that, to kind of finalize everything, is the one thing about this was supposed to be the big payoff. And all it did was they wanted more.
It fueled the fire.
It fueled the fire even more.
Yep. And then the WrestleMania match. This is where Mankind started his whole... And like I said, if you think about it, all of these other characters stemmed from this feud. This is when Mankind took off. Because he wanted his WrestleMania moment. He wanted to be involved in the main event of WrestleMania. So this is when Mankind was trying to become the referee. He painted the stripes onto his shirt. You know, he's wearing his shirt and tie and shit. So, but we'll get into that when we get to next week, when we talk about what happened leading up to WrestleMania, and we'll go a little bit past WrestleMania. I have to watch it again, and I'll pick up a little bit more. Because I'll forget, because I'm that guy.
Yeah. But with that being said, JP, you got anything else you want to add to it?
No. This is just, I'm telling you, we will delve into this feud. This could be a 2 or 3 parter, guys. I love this feud. We'll probably do a 2-parter and then probably do a 3-parter talking about ending the feud, and then we'll probably give our thoughts, and then I'll put out a poll on Twitter which feud you guys would like to see. I'll give you four feuds, and there's going to be some WCW feuds in there. So yeah. I might just do all 4 WCW feuds, and then we'll just try to do like every other WCW, and then a WWE, and then a WCW, and then a WWE. I might even do an AWA feud. There's one of those. There's a couple of those. Vern Gagne and Nick Bockwinkel. I mean, for God's sake, we could go on and on with all the feuds and shit.
Oh, but, yeah. Bobby, you got anything?
Good talk.
Good talk.
No, I can't wait to. Really, TP?
I didn't say anything.
All I want to say is I can't wait for parts 2 and 3 of this. I can't wait to talk more about this. And your boy DJ Skinny Penis signing out.
Oh, good Lord.
It's funny.
With that being said, guys, be sure to check us out tomorrow where we do This Week in Wrestling. We also have BCW going on tomorrow all night. So be sure to check it out then. And also, with that being said, well, also this Saturday, I'll be going live on Twitch. You guys are more than welcome to come hang out with me on Saturday. A Sunday, we'll be going live on Twitch as well, and we'll also be coming over to do TLC live reaction and review right here on the Cold Bone Show. Oh, and This Week in Wrestling, of course, will be over on Bobby's channel. Be sure to go give him a like and subscribe to his channel. We're trying to get him up to 200 subs. And as always, guys, thank you so much for coming out and hanging out with us in the chat. It's been great having you. You guys have a wonderful night. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye now.
See you guys.